Okay, hey, welcome to another episode of On the Wrist from Off the Cuff. Today we have a review that's been a long time coming, but I'm really happy to share with you this brand new Seiko. Now, a little bit about the brand. Seiko was founded back in 1881. They are, of course, Japanese in origin, but now have factories throughout Asia. A really fun, interesting thing about Seiko is that they cover all market segments from entry level to extremely high end. Now, in terms of this type of watch, I'd consider it a dive watch. Some key common characteristics in design language: when you're looking for a dive watch, you're going to want, of course, water resistance. Typically, there's some type of screw down crown. You're going to want something that's tough, legible, with a dive time bezel, and a diver's extension is always nice if on bracelet. Now, this is the Seiko Prospex SBDC127, which is the JDM nomenclature, or the international nomenclature, which we use here in the US, is the SPB187. And it's basically a modern reinterpretation of Seiko's original 1968 Marine Master diver. And man, I've been waiting a long time for this watch. One, for Seiko to make it, and then two, for me to find the right example of it. And I have to thank Carrot & Co. out in New York. They're an authorized dealer for Seiko. They were a real dream to work with. I was able to hit them up on Instagram, ask them to send some pictures of what they had, asked a bunch of questions about the way the bezel aligned and the back play, and does it rest on the click, all that stuff, even down to, hey, how do you feel about the alignment of the date window within the disc within the window? And they were still super helpful and humored me the whole time. So I appreciate that very much. And thanks to them, I was able to source this. The reason why I had taken so long is actually I originally planned this review for another unit, which didn't work out, from another vendor, and it ultimately dragged on and on and on. So I will not be mentioning that particular vendor in this video. But yeah, didn't work out. But I will give Carrot & Co. props for coming through. So with that said, let's zoom the camera out, get this piece in hand, and take a closer look. Okay, let's take a look. There you have it, guys. This has been called the Marine Master 42, or the Marine Master 200 most popularly, and some people call it the Marine Master 200 reduced because it's smaller than the first iteration of the Marine Master 200, which was slightly larger. But man, this thing is honestly just, for me, quite definitive of what Seiko can offer. It has the 4 o'clock crown. Do I love my SBDC 101? Absolutely perfect watch. But for me, this is, I feel a little bit more Seiko specific. Although, of course, that unit, recalls the 62 Moss, and it's been dubbed the 62 Max. Here with the Marine Master 200, it harkens back to not Seiko's first diver, but Seiko's first professional diver. And I think that's something cool. And honestly, you can see that this design language is carried out and influenced through so many other new models, that created, kind of a style of its own when it comes to kind of this type of case. The 4 o'clock crown, just the general design language definitely speaks to your modern Seiko. And I dig it. I definitely appreciate that. And the finishing is impeccable, as you guys might expect. Look at those big fat bevels, just highly polished there. Man, is it Zaratsu? I mean, it could be. I'm not 100% sure, but man, look at that. Look at the break and the definition from between brushed and polished. Just breathe that in for a minute. Look at the coinage work on that bezel. Just really, really, just absolutely spectacular from that standpoint. Guys, monkey in the room, these are $1,200 USD, and that is the retail. You can get them for slightly more, or you can get them for slightly less. It kind of just depends on where you look and what type of deal you try to strike. but there are deals to be had, and sometimes the deal is that you can get it while other people, it's sold out everywhere, and then one dealer decides to mark up the prices so that they can hold on to stock, so the people that really want them will get them. So that could also be your deal, is you have it and nobody else does, because right now these are relatively scarce because they're selling really quickly. I think Seiko's place in the market is really probably the best it's been for them in years, especially considering how well received Grand Seiko is right now. And then with that, Grand Seiko also kind of has piggybacked the Prospex line as well as the Presage line, and being very, very popular, especially in the US. And of course, the US is such a huge market, a lot of trend setting. There's, other areas all over the world that do follow some of the trends that are set here in the States. Now, the dimensions on here I think are really great. Some of you are going to think, oh, that's too big. Well, it's not. It's 42 millimeter diameter. It's only 12.5 millimeters thick, which is surprisingly thin. And then it's 48.7 millimeters lug to lug. It's fully stainless steel. It does have that nice Dia Shield hard coating. We do have a flat sapphire with inner AR, which it does a great job of. The thing I really like about Seiko's AR coating, when they decide to use it, that is, more so recently than previously, but it's very clear. It's a clear, anti-reflective coating. It doesn't give you a lot of other tones, no harsh purples or blues. It really renders quite clear. And you can catch a little hint or glint of blue hues depending on how harshly you try to push a reflection to try to really look at that coating. But I will say that it integrates really, really well. Now, in terms of the bezel action, of course, unidirectional 120 click rotating with a really nice coated steel insert that really mimics a nice high glossy ceramic. But let's go ahead and get the action. Ooh, that's good. Right on the click. I try to back it up and it centers. So I love that. That's exactly the type of bezel alignment that I look for. So I was very, very fortunate from that standpoint, and very happy with that. The bezel action itself, not quite as tight as my SBDC101, but also it's easier to turn. So it's a trade-off, right? So maybe doesn't feel quite as precise, if you will, but by no means slop. I mean, this isn't SKX or anything. Aftermarket SKX-ish, I guess you could say, maybe. But yeah, no, this is really, really nice. And you can see the finishing on that coin edge is just immaculate. That nice bevel coming off of the crystal does add a little bit of visual play for you there, which is nice as well, especially since everything is fully indexed, which is one of the things I really like about Seiko divers, and also ties in to Seiko, them being able to put divers 200 meters on there, because they are ISO certified divers and they meet all of those little tedious requirements and testing. So very nice from that standpoint. The crown is screw down. It's unsigned. That's just, part of the new Prospex thing. If you want a signed crown, you either have to go up a couple of tiers or over, I'd say, laterally into the Presage line for signed crowns. But typically they try to keep the Prospex line without signed crowns, just because it's kind of the more tool watch thing to do. But another thing that they do within that is also having drilled lugs, which is amazing. So they give you a lot of what you ask for, and then there's certain things that maybe you might highly value having this etched or signed, but it's not the hugest priority on Seiko's wish list at the moment. Now, in terms of The movement that's in here, you are getting that wonderful 6R35 movement. Gives you 70 hours of power reserve, which is great. So almost 3 days versus the 50-hour power reserve you could get from a 6R15. And also this does have about 1 more joule, so 24 joules versus 23 joules of the 6R15. Now, as far as when we get into the dial hands and lume, we do have nicely applied indices there. I'd say the one kind of odd choice that they made was to put that little half, or not even half, like a third marker right there at the 3 o'clock next to the date window. I think I would have been fine without that, but they did that, and I mean, it's nice from a when it's loomed and it's dark and you get extra just Lume there is great, but for me, I could have lived without it. I think it's a little odd, but it's by no means, for me anyway, a deal breaker. And honestly, I think they even now are carrying that over into the newer Marine Master 300. So I guess Seiko is really doubling down on that particular design aspect for the Marine Master style of watch. Now, you do have that very nice blue sunray dial. You have the date at the 3 o'clock. The date window isn't really done to any special level there in terms of kind of finishing or style. The SBDC101 does have that beveled edge, which I would have liked to see here. It's not here, but it's by no means sloppy or anything like that. So I would have been fine if they would have just maybe outlined it like they did with the previous Marine Master 200. But a date window, like a bezel around it would have been nice, but not in this case. It's just a little bit more sparse. We do also have these really nice handset here, brushed and polished, which is nice so that when you're using it in different lighting conditions, you're going to keep legibility pretty much at all times, which is wonderful. And then, of course, you do have that signature Seiko kind of stoplight seconds hand, which is quite nice. Again, this does have 200 meters of water resistance, so it meets or exceeds those ISO standards to carry that full text. We do have 20 millimeter lugs. Again, they are drilled. We have an 20 down to 18 millimeter taper. We do have a 3-link style with angular center links. And then, of course, we do have the high polished accents as well as polished sides of the links. This does use a pin and collar connecting system, and I gotta say, pin and collar works. Set it and forget it. You never have to worry about anything backing out, stripping out, anything like that. It's not the easiest thing, but once you know how to do it, I gotta say that honestly, it becomes a non-issue. So I have no problem with these using pin and collar. If anything, it's just something that is a little quirk. I wouldn't call it necessarily a drawback. So we do have solid links and solid end links. And then, of course, mostly brushed there. Really nice. You can see they're multi-piece links. Not full 3 links, but essentially it's kind of an H with a connector that is made to look like basically like both ends of this link are one. They just go underneath, and then there's another piece that goes over that, and basically those 3 pieces come together to create this look, which I enjoy very, very much. And I think it really goes with the case. You do have the round areas, but you do have the nice flat and angular facets, and I think that ties in beautifully to this bracelet. So again, it's just a new era of Seiko where you don't have to mod them. You guys know I'm crazy about Seiko mods. You guys have seen kind of my collection of modded turtles and SKXs, and yeah, I mean, this again is just another Seiko that you just don't have to mod, and I can definitely appreciate that. I think the design language really flows and is really, really quite handsome. As far as the clasp goes, you know, again, very similar to the basically the 62 Max. It's kind of the new style and new range. The nice thing is they're quite flat. You do get micro adjustment holes here. Of course, the folding portion is milled, which is wonderful. And then the signed portion of this flip over, although it's still pretty thin metal, it still looks really nice all put together. And then you do have this little kind of, and not the greatest driver's extension ever, but it does work. And With gloves, it's a little odd. I don't want to muscle it on the camera and knock anything over, but there you go. Ooh, there you go. So you do get a nice diver's extension, but that's all it is. It's not going to be any type of on-the-fly adjustment. The nice thing, though, that I really enjoy is the finishing on here. Look at that. Again, you get that gorgeous bevel, beautiful brushing, DiaShield coating, so it's going to stay looking good. But yeah, for me, what really sells it, and I'm one, again, in the past, I've swapped out Marine Master 300 clasps with a ratcheting system onto all of my mods, and I plan to do it here. And same thing with my SBDC101, but I didn't because I've learned that this is honestly, it wears nicer. It's not as cool in terms of its tech, but it wears nicer. And honestly, this setup flows really well with the links. It doesn't leave any gaps or any odd spaces like the Marine Master 300 does because it's a little bit lumpy in comparison. So really nice from that standpoint. But guys, I've rambled on long enough. Let's go ahead and get this on wrist and see how it wears. Okay guys, as you can see on my 7¼ inch wrist, this thing wears really, really well. Get a little bit more arm in there. You can get an idea of scale. Of course, I'm more than just kind of a talking wrist, but if I get real close for a wrist shot there, the little wristy angle, there's going to be some lens distortion that's going to make the watch seem quite large. But honestly, as you can see, one of the things that Seiko's really known for is sculpting these cases, undercutting them, and really just forming them for pure ergonomics. I mean, these are absolutely comfortable and a pleasure to wear, and it's one of the reasons why many of Seiko's divers are so oversized by a lot of people's standards, but they wear extremely well, and it all has to do with really putting function before form. Here, I think they have a nice balance. I by no means would say this watch wears small, but it definitely wears much closer to your standard SKX, and it definitely smaller than any other Marine Master, like anything that's ever been on the market before. So really loving that, and I just enjoy oh man, the finishes, the facets. Look at the way the light just plays and dances off of this watch. It's really quite stunning, and the proportions are wonderful. I like that it's shrunk down a little bit, but we still have the 20mm lugs. That was one of the things that kind of turned me off about the Marine Master 300, was that it had 20mm lugs, but it was this big old case. It's like 44 point something, and then it's super tall and all that. Like, this is so much more manageable on the wrist and wearable, and just kind of that everyday feature that I've really been looking for. I love the design language, but in this scale, I have to say they really knocked it out of the park. Do I think they could have shrunken down the scale any more? Maybe. I think they could have done it maybe a 41 or a 40 and kind of got away with it without it looking overly small, but I see why they stopped here, because I think this is a real sweet spot. And obviously, if you search, you'll find that 42mm divers are selling more than 40mm. It's just, it is what it is. I mean, there's a big enthusiast core that wants vintage, that wants smaller watches, but the average everyday man is looking for a watch that is a little bit more wrist presence than that. It's just what it is. And this isn't really meant to be hyper vintage. This is meant to be a modern reinterpretation. So I think the sizing at 42, and then also it leaves a little bit of a distance in between the SBDC 101. So it makes there a case for both of them, one being kind of that ultimate 40mm, this being that ultimate 42. So you do get a little bit of the best of both worlds there, and I can't fault them for that. But let's go ahead, get this off the wrist, and actually check out the lume on this bad boy. Okay, let's go ahead and hit the lights. As you can see, that Seiko Lume Bright glows just like you think it would. That beautiful bright green glow. I mean, you can't really mess with it in terms of that. And, you get the mixture of both having great visual impact and initial darkness, but then also it has a lot of staying power. So Really great. Also, you can notice that Lume pip. It is shielded, which is great. So it won't get discolored over time. But one thing I really like to work on when I do my Lume shots is put in some low light transition, because you're not always going to be out in the middle of a field enjoying direct sunlight. A lot of times you're going to be coming in and out of a building, or maybe walking underneath an overhang or the shade of a tree, or maybe just spending time in your favorite automobile. So what I like to do here is kind of give you a look at, in less than optimal lighting, how this watch is going to render from its color palette to its textures and finishing there, as well as how legible it will be in that transitional lighting, maybe during the golden hours, or at depth, right? So very, very nice. You can see that blue dial does want to soak in that lighting there, but then it also can get quite dark. This isn't a super high contrast sunburst on there, which I like. It gives it, I think it's kind of somewhere in the middle, although of course in this transitional lighting you're going to get a lot of the high highlights with a lot of the low lights, so it's going to appear a little bit more high contrast, but that's more so the nature of the lighting. But the way you guys saw it, obviously under the previous lights, it gives you an idea that the dial renders quite blue, which I enjoy. But even some harsher lighting here, very high contrast, typically you're going to be able to expose any type of imperfections in the finish. But I think you'll notice that that light uniformly just glides over those links. Really, really finished. Absolutely, really, really nice. So great from that standpoint. All right, see, now you can see that blue dial really, again, feel very, very blue, and I think it does a great job of that. I love the color play. Having that little splash of red, that pop of color, is very nice, of course. And then having the blue dial with the black bezel, it just adds some dimensions, makes it feel a little bit more modern and just less sterile, which is really nice. On the wrist, guys, great fitment. Definitely feels more hefty and substantial, very much akin to my SBDC101. Also, I think it's better balanced than the Marine Master 300. Plus, it has a thinner case and thicker links in terms of the bracelet. So for me, it's not just the scale, which I really like more, that it's scaled down, but I also like the proportions themselves. It's a little bit thinner, and then also it has wider links, you know, in comparison, in contrast, and thicker links, which I think suit the case a lot more. It just feels better balanced, I think, visually and stylistically, and then it ends up being quite functional as well, in terms of balance. Now, so far as model variations go, right now there is it's available also with a matte black dial with a brushed stainless steel insert, and a lot of people were like, wow, why didn't they do the brushed stainless steel insert with the blue, and then they could have just done one with all black. And I think they kind of made the right decision, because they gave us something a little bit different and not what we necessarily expected. And I think although a black on black setup would be, I think, quite optimal, who knows, maybe I would have chosen that. And a blue with steel bezel insert, brushed, that also would be traditionally quite handsome and good looking. It's not to say that they won't do that down the line. You know how Seiko is. There'll be a patty version. There'll be every other. They already came out with a green and gilt version. So it's only a matter of time. But I think in terms of initial release, good choices, good model variants. And this is definitely a very handsome one that fits really well into kind of my large collection of Seikos. Now, in terms of comparable models go, I mean, it's pretty simple, guys. This watch out heritages similar micro brands, and if you look at, you know, what's within this price point, it's a lot of micro brands and a lot of Swatch Group watches. But again, this for me is pretty much going to always out heritage those brands, especially within the realm of dive watches, because Seiko has been so groundbreaking within their history and their lineage when it comes to the world of dive watches. And then if you kind of compare feature to feature, yeah, you again, I'd say there are micro brands that are out featuring this model in certain ways, but I'd say then you compare that, let's say, to within kind of that independent Swiss umbrella, whether it be models like your Oris, Aquis, or even Swatch Group watches. I think here you're going to find some better features in terms of being more in-house, and being true ISO certified divers with the chops, with the heritage, the lineage. Seiko wasn't bought out or, you know, revived by anybody. If anything, they were the ones who did the killing. So as much as I love a good Certina DS action or a Mito Ocean Star, it's Seiko that put those guys out of business, and it is what it is, man. So with that said, guys, the bottom line here, you're going to get Seiko's in-house qualities packed into a diver, with, I'd say, Presage-like fit and finish. Because I know a lot of you, when you think, Prospex, you think just straight tool watch, but I will have to say that this particular range of watches, in that $1,200 price point, they definitely take things up a notch, and it's impressive, guys. I really like it. So with that said, let me know what you guys think in the comments below. If you like the video, please do it like, and if you haven't already, please subscribe for more content just like this. Thanks, guys.